Predicting things is always quite tricky, but I think what we're mostly waiting for is to see whether Tyson Fury is going to stay retired or not. At the moment, he is, and when he made the announcement, I believed him. I believe him still, but that doesn't mean that he won't change his mind. Fighters often do change their minds. He's done it before himself. We saw him come back after retiring after his fight against Dillian Whyte. I do think he will. I do think he will come back. He's spoken quite a lot in the past about how he needs boxing in his life for routine, for focus, about how important exercise is for his mental health. And I think whilst he still feels like he's physically capable, I think we will see him back. And I think Joshua, to be honest, is kind of hanging on waiting for that to happen, because that is just the biggest and best fight for the pair of them. So I do expect Fury to make a return. It won't necessarily be that soon, because I think he will feel, even if he's getting a bit of an itch, that if it was this short-lived, it might look slightly ridiculous. Although maybe he doesn't really care about that. Fighters often don't care particularly what other people think, but I think we will see him back. I think we will see Dubois box Alexander Usyk in the summer, because he was supposed to fight Joseph Parker, of course. That didn't happen. He then said that the next thing he would want to do would be just to skip straight to that fight against Usyk, and Usyk has said that he's very much open to that. So I do expect that's something we'll see in the summer. And then, of course, if we did get those two, if we got Usyk against Dubois and Fury against Joshua, then that opens up all sorts of possibilities when it comes to winners fighting each other, even losers fighting each other. It just keeps that whole merry-go-round going. But I do think there's a lot of good heavyweights coming up. I don't think they're going to go on forever, the current crop we've got. And I think people are just assuming that when they finally come to the end, the likes of AJ and Fury and Usyk and Wilder seems like he's kind of done now, that the cupboard will be bare. I don't think it will be. I think there's plenty of good fighters coming through. So it's the heavyweights that we look at mainly, but obviously we've got Canelo as well. He's boxing in May, and should he win, then what we're thinking is that he'll fight Terence Crawford in autumn, in the fall, maybe in America. It's a bit more difficult to tell what will be in Saudi and what might be elsewhere now, because Riyadh season cards will be in Riyadh. That I'm absolutely sure about, and they will want the absolute biggest fights. But with Turki Al-Sheikh buying the Ring magazine, he can now take the Ring magazine cards wherever he likes, because that's his independent thing. And that's why he's doing Eubank versus Ben in London. He's doing a card in New York in Times Square at the start of May. Again, American fighters on it, so he's going to New York. So I think we could see a combination of things. The next big one really is Eubank against Ben for a British audience, and there is a rematch clause for that too. So we may well see that again before the end of the year. Beterbiev Bivol was, again, it was an amazing fight. I was there at the first one, and I didn't think it could really be improved upon, to be honest, but I did think that the second fight was better than the first, because Beterbiev started in a higher gear. I think he realised in the first fight he very nearly ran out of road and left it too late, and Bivol himself realised when Beterbiev was getting on top of him a bit in rounds 4 and 5 that he had to find an answer, much like Usyk did 2 or 3 times against Tyson Fury. He managed to just dig in, grind himself back in and turn things around. And he knew heading into the final few rounds he couldn't have happened what happened in the first fight, where Beterbiev finished strong and Bivol finished stronger, and I thought deservedly won another really close fight. It was brilliant to watch from ringside, because the pair of them they're just so good. They're just so good in every possible conceivable capacity. You look at the way their technical ability, you look at their grit, their determination, their just pure will to win. I think we will see a third fight. I think we have to see a third fight. I wouldn't say that necessarily all the belts will be in the third fight, because they don't need to be. They've both become undisputed once each. They've both claimed that accolade. Nobody's confused as to who the best two fighters in that division are. So I wouldn't be surprised if the belts scattered slightly, which would be great news for someone like Callum Smith after his win against Joshua Buatsi. Great news for David Benavidez after his win against David morale. Could be really good news for Anthony Yard or Lyndon Arthur, whoever wins that fight at the end of April. So I think that landscape is going to become really, really interesting. But I do think that we'll see a third fight because the demand for it is 100% there from everybody. The chief supporter on that card was Joseph Parker against, in the end, Martin Bakole. It was kind of a mad week, really, because Dubois looked great. He looked brilliant all week. He was absolutely bang up for it, as he always is, and then fell ill late on. And there was a scramble to see who would come in. Martin Bakole seemed like the best choice, but these things aren't that straightforward. Your medicals have to be in order. You have to be in decent enough shape to take the fight. His medicals were fine. He was in Congo, but they managed to get him there. He was 22 stone, which was actually kind of okay because the way he fights, he carries the weight pretty well. People were talking about how dangerous it would be for Parker, him coming late into the fight, but Parker prepared brilliantly. He's on an amazing run. You look at the wins against Wilder and Zhang, and it was getting very interesting, actually, in that second round before the finish came, because Bakole had taken some big shots from Parker and just kept rumbling forward. And I was thinking to myself, this is going to be very hard for Parker for 4 or 5 rounds. And then he caught him with that big overhand right straight on the top of the head, and his coordination just completely went. I think if he'd had 12, 13 weeks of training, he might have been able to soak it up a bit better, and his trainer might have been tempted to give him a bit more of a chance to recover. But given the circumstances, they stopped it, and that was, I think it was fair enough. I think it was the right thing to do. It was really unfortunate for Parker that he didn't get to box for a world title, which of course he would have done against Dubois. And I do feel like he deserves an opportunity next time he fights. Agit Kabayel won that night too against Yilei Zhang, and he's another one who's had an amazing run, and it'd be easy to pair those two together, but I feel like they've both kind of done enough. One's interim champion with the WBO, one with the WBC. I almost wouldn't want to see them fight each other because one would have to lose and then they would drop down the pecking order, and I don't think they would really, either of them, deserve that. But they'll have to wait and see what happens with the belts, because if Usyk does fight Dubois, for example, in another battle for undisputed, then whoever won that, I think after that, I think the belts might splinter off. The IBF already did it once, which is how Dubois is IBF champion, but I think some of the other sanctioning bodies might be tempted to say enough's enough now, other people deserve a chance. So they might have to wait a little bit. He might have to wait a bit, Parker, but maybe he could even get upgraded to full champion, being WBO interim. That's something that they do, the World Boxing Organisation. So I know that he would much prefer to fight for it, but I think you look at his resume recently, and he was supposed to fight Dubois for a world title. So he's a very popular guy, Parker. I think everybody feels like it's fair if he gets to at least fight for one next. But as I say, you never know, he might get upgraded. Eubank Ben is one of these fights that people were kind of wondering how popular it would be, because before the first fight I was wondering how popular it would be, but that was October 2022. I just didn't really know if people would look at it and feel like it was a bit manufactured, because Ben was coming up from welterweight, Eubank's a middleweight. No one had really talked about them fighting each other before, and we know a bit about the backstory and the surnames, obviously, and it kind of felt like it was being crowbarred in a bit. But by the time fight week came around, there was a lot of interest in it. But after what happened, there's definitely more interest now. Definitely. I was on the press tour last week, and after Eubank did what he did with the egg, that just sent things through the roof. That clip went everywhere. It went all over the world. People had something to say about it. And this is not a fight of global significance, really, because this is a domestic rivalry. They're good fighters, of course, but it's not for a world title or anything like that. It's a bit like Hey Bellew in that regard. It's a grudge match, which is kind of local to us. But those are the ones that sell best a lot of the time. And it isn't an easy pick, because you look at their resumes, and Eubank should win, because he's the one who's boxed at middleweight, super middleweight. He's the one who's boxed at a higher level than Ben. The deck seems to be stacked against Conor Benn, but there is a real fire in his belly, Ben. He is aggressive. I get the feeling that this means absolutely everything to him, given what's happened the last couple of years. he needs a big win. If he were to get convincingly beaten by Eubank, there is a rematch clause, but you don't always have a rematch if there's a rematch clause, if there's no real kind of appetite for it. So I think there's more on the line for Ben than there is for Eubank, but defeat is completely unthinkable for the pair of them. So I don't anticipate any problem with Eubank getting up for the fight. And I think the Daz will come into it more as we get nearer the date. We haven't seen Eubank Senior yet, but I do think we will. I don't think he'll be able to resist it. Nigel was at the press conferences. Nigel Benn still looks like a dangerous man when he was having when he grabbed Eubank Jr. by the throat just after the egg incident. So I think this one will just keep building. It'll just keep building towards tonight. And originally people wondered whether taking it to a stadium was a particularly good idea. I think in the end, by the look of it, with reports we hear from pre-order waiting queues and all the rest of it, I think they could probably have gone to Wembley with this as it turned out. But Spurs is a great venue. I've been there a couple of times, and yeah, come April the 26th, it's going to be quite something. So we've got a good crop of heavyweights still. People are looking at AJ and Fury because they've been at the top of the heavyweight division for so long and wondering what's coming behind them. But there's plenty coming behind them. Obviously, we've already got Daniel Dubois, who's an IBF world champion, and off the back of those recent run of performances that he's had, obviously a crushing win against Joshua at Wembley, he's still young. He's still got a long time left. So Dubois, I think, could be at the top of that heavyweight division for a good few years to come. I wouldn't say that he's invincible or invulnerable. He's lost fights already, of course, but I think he will be up towards the top of that division. Because in heavyweight terms, you can lose a fight, but you're only ever one win away from being right back up there. You can lose a couple, but if people want to see you, and people will want to see Dubois, and of course he's got Queensberry behind him, I think that he's a bit of a fixture, really. I think he's going to be there to stay for a while. And Queensberry have pretty much got the UK heavyweights on lockdown to an extent. Another couple they've got, obviously, Fabio Wardley, who we saw that big win against Fraser Clarke. I'm hearing rumours that he could be in line to fight for a big title, possibly outdoors at Ipswich Football Club in the summer, which would be tremendous for him. His backstory is incredible, really, coming through white collar. He's actually never lost a fight, and that win against Fraser Clarke on a big platform after the incredible first fight. There are possibilities with him. He does look a bit open and reckless at times, but he finds a way to win, and he's got genuine lights out power. Lawrence Okoli's another one, former world champion at cruiserweight, has come up to heavyweight, and he looked good on his professional debut. He boxes against Richard Riakporhe at the start of April, which is a good fight. Riakporhe coming up from cruiserweight as well, but I would expect Okoli to win that fight, and that's a great springboard for him to launch him into bigger fights, onto a Riyadh season fight. That's the kind of thing that he would definitely be looking for. I'm certainly not ruling Fraser Clarke out of still being able to make an impact in world terms, maybe in the heavyweight division. There's a long way back after the defeat against Wardley, but these things happen in heavyweight boxing. He got caught early. You could see the facial damage. You could see the kind of dent along the top of the cheekbone, which was pretty alarming to see from ringside. He's back before too long, and we'll have to have a look at how he looks, but he's still got the pedigree, he's still got the credentials. If mentally he's able to get over that, it was kind of a one-punch wipeout. It wasn't any kind of sustained beating. So we'll see what's in his locker when he comes back, but he is still a good fighter. The one that everybody's talking about, and the one who could quickly establish himself as being a bigger force, if he hasn't already, in my mind he may well have done, than the other three I've mentioned. You couldn't put him above Fabio Wardley yet, because Wardley's win against Fraser Clarke was a significant win, but you could put him above Fraser Clarke and Lawrence Okoli is Moses Itauma. He won everything as a youth. World Youth Champion, European Youth Champion. He won almost all his fights by stoppage as well as an amateur, which is very, very unusual, and he's blitzed everybody so far. He's very, very young. He's still, I think, just 20. He's been looking to break Mike Tyson's record to become the world's youngest ever heavyweight champion. I don't think that'll happen because of the situation with the belts. But even now, there aren't that many people that I wouldn't put him in against and say that he would have no chance. I wouldn't put him in against Usyk. I wouldn't put him in against Fury still, I don't think. Although Tyson's had those two back-to-back defeats. And anyway, Tyson's retired, so we don't really, we kind of take him out of the equation. Anybody else, though, I probably would. I'm not saying he would definitely beat the likes of Joshua or Parker or Kabayel or Dubois, but I think he'd be really, really dangerous. You do get the feeling with him that it's a when, not an if, that it's a matter of time. But we haven't seen what might happen if he gets hit hard, when he gets hit hard, because that will happen. And until you see that and you see somebody ride that storm out, you never really know. But everybody says the same thing. Everybody I've spoken to who's seen him fight, who's seen him in the gym, everyone agrees that he is the real thing. So it would be surprising if we don't, over the next few years, see him make a real impact. But nothing is guaranteed, nothing is given. And at the minute of the new crop, of the ones who are looking like they could really do something over the next few years, Dubois is at the head of that pack. But it's a healthy situation. It's a really healthy situation. As I said, it's easy for people who maybe don't follow the sport that closely to think, well, AJ's going to retire, Fury's retired. Those were the glory days, stadium fights. It'll be a long time before we see anything like that again. I really don't think it will. I really, really don't, because there's some good fighters coming through. And they're exciting fighters as well. They're good to watch. TV-friendly fighters. So yeah, I think the next few years looks good.